Right, really looking forward to today's lunch break guest. So, wildlife gardener Gerry Maguire Thompson from Shoreham. Now, he's just finished writing a book about last year and based on his garden. Gerry joins me on the line now. Really lovely to have you with us, Gerry.
Hello, Sarah. Pleasure to be with you.
But as you say, you in your
Yeah,
email, you sort of talk about the transformative the effect that your garden has had on you. And as you point out as well, this is 2020, the year, as David Attenborough said, that we fell back in nature. And what I love about, the sound of your book is it used to be that it would be all neatly manicured lawns and plants standing to attention. But we've kind of moved away from that, haven't we, with gardening?
I think so. I think a lot of people are. As you say, a lot of people during various stages of the pandemic have realized how important nature is. Those who have a garden, the fortune to have that, are getting into it more. Those that haven't are hopefully able to get out in nature or in parks or, down by the riverside or in the woods. And I think as gardens go, there's a lot more information about kind of wilding and rewilding your garden. These are keywords these days, and it kind of does itself. You can start by just making it a bit more untidy and not killing everything, not deadheading everything.
You noticed as well as a result of this that your garden was attracting more species, and I suppose as well because we've been able to benefit from our gardens, you've actually noticed what's coming in and out of the garden. So what have you seen?
Yes, I've from watching it every day and doing a diary, which I was doing before this year anyway. I've noticed that once the garden becomes kind of richer because it's wilder and it becomes more fertile, more resistant to drought and more resistant to storms and things, and it provides, as things go wild, they provide habitat for creatures like shelter, protection from birds of prey and from wind and places to roost in night, places to make nests. So we've had the common things like sparrows and robins and blackbirds, and I love them. Say actually that's my favorite part of the garden, seeing intimately the details of their little lives every day. But then there are the sparrowhawks that come by. There are uh, collared doves. There are hedgehogs come by, and it's a great joy to see hedgehogs just attracted in naturally by the richness of what's on offer, all the things it can eat. And then there are stag beetles, which are very rare these days, the slow worms, there are foxes come in, and I got a dragonfly recently, which is very unusual for a small urban garden where there isn't really a big body of water.
So you've really,
So
you've really, by the sound of it, created a real haven for wildlife. Where did it start then? Where did the idea of doing this? I mean, I suppose I'm asking you your garden before you decided to do this, and as it is now. When did you think, right, I want to change the way it is?
yeah, well, I've always been keen on wildlife, nature, conservation. Was brought up, born in the countryside, although an urban dweller now. And I think when we moved to Shoreham by sea, I thought we got a front garden, then let's just start and make it a little wilder, attract some birds, put bird feeders up, and then it just grew and grew. It became a kind of, it's like a fortress really. The hedge has grown wild up around the outside edges and over the gate, and we find children come and peer in. It's like a kind of magical garden kingdom to them, and they love it. And everybody stops and looks in and sees that it's different from the other gardens. And then in the center, it's open and plants have light to grow. So it happened by stages, and I started to introduce a couple of native species instead of other species like laurel, which don't really provide anything for our native wildlife in these islands, and just gradually put in native hedge species like hawthorn and things like that, and then growing up creepers like honeysuckle, which grow through that and very quickly, and ivy, and they make a very tight network which gives very good protection uh, for birds to shelter in and to hide away from predators and to roost in at night. So there's a big chatter every morning with the sparrows. Just people walk by and think, "What is that din?" But it's such a cheer. I'm being a bit anthropomorphic, but it's such a cheerful sounding thing. They're probably bitching at each other, if I can say that, and expressing annoyance a lot of the time. But it does sound very cheerful, and I find that very uplifting.
I tell you what, though, because listening to you talking about this garden, you kind of, when you hear about these wild gardens, you think, oh, it's just a question of stopping doing the lawn and letting it get on with it. But from what you're saying, it's actually a lot of thought and hard work, and getting the right combination of plants to attract the wildlife, and making sure that it all works together.
I think that is only partly true, Sarah. I think mostly it does work itself, and that's the joy of a wildlife garden. If anybody just took their garden, urban or otherwise, and the book is about urban gardens in particular, and what you can do with a very small urban space. If you just let things go, you would get a very radical increase in wildlife. And if you provide some food source, just like bird feeders and so on, you would get that. You don't have to do a lot. Provide some water, so maybe make a little pond. But I was I'm just refining it by bringing in more native species, and this was my idea to make a big kind of dense hedge around the outside, and that has turned out to be a very good feature. And I thought, and that would have grown anyway from the hedging material there, but I took the opportunity to put in some more wildlife friendly species. So that has improved the thing, but and grown over time. But you don't have to really go to a lot of things. It mainly does it itself. It's more getting out of the way, I would say.
And in terms of, how quickly you notice these changes, how quickly you notice species are appearing in your garden, and what's really interesting is that you were able to you were able to watch this in a way that prior to the pandemic we'd have been rushing around, bustling on with our lives, and you didn't get that same sort of insight.
That's right, Sarah. Having time in my hands and being limited and not being able to do much else, not being able to go out of the house really for a long time, I was looking out more. So you're right about that. But in terms of when it all started, we noticed a difference in wildlife appearing very quickly, in a matter of weeks and months. And then it was a couple of years before a hedgehog appeared, and that was by accident really, because I was feeding live mealworms for the robin, and because robins love these. And what I discovered was that any that weren't eaten by the robin would climb out of the feeder, drop onto the ground, and one evening we noticed there was a hedgehog underneath eating these mealworms. So it had been attracted by an accidental, an unintended measure. It's really interesting how things can happen that you hadn't expected. But basically, the principle is if you make it wildlife friendly, the wildlife that are nearby will come. And that includes sparrowhawks, which, because of there's so many sparrows, they're so successful in reproducing that it's a hotspot it's a snack station for sparrowhawks, which are exciting creatures as well. And the population seems to be able to cope with it.
And we've heard actually, talk about the hedgehog. They've really been threatened, the diminishing population. So really wonderful to see one in your garden. Do they then become regular visitors once you've seen the hedgehog? Do you then start to notice that they know that the food source is there, so back they come on a regular basis?
Yes, yes, they're a bit unpredictable. You can't tell, but yes, broadly, the one we were watching last year came every night at the same time when we were taking our dog out. We'd take our dog out for a walk and come back in, close the door, and the hedgehog would pop out of the foliage and start eating. Um, it's very hard to guarantee hedgehogs, but I have to say, seeing that hedgehog in the garden, the rarity of these creatures and how adorable they are, it was just I can't remember feeling as happy as that. But it's such a wonderful feeling of like something is right in the world, when this beautiful creature is just a couple of feet from where you're standing, living happily. And then a mate came along for it, and they were kind of huffing and puffing in the foliage, and that was. I mean, that's like a validation of your garden,
Oh, and
but
it's I
it can
love the
take a
fact that
while
you've
to.
you've decided to you've put this in a book so that people can sort of see your garden unfolding. What did you do? Did you just take pictures as you went along?
I have taken pictures and I've taken video and I'm putting those on my website. The book, I think there's a big market in wildlife and nature books at the moment that they're very successful. They were before the pandemic and are even more so now.
Yeah, and in terms of it's lovely for you as well to look back on a year, and I love the fact that people are commenting and people are interested and talking about what you're doing.
Yes, I mean the neighborhood is really excited about it, and I think what happens with a successful wildlife garden is there's an overspill. Successful species reproduce there, like the sparrows and other birds, because it's a great habitat for them. There's lots of natural food, like insects, invertebrates for them as well as what you put out, and so they kind of spill over and they populate adjacent gardens and they spread out through the neighborhood. So we're actually, and also people come by and they say, I'd like to have a garden a bit like that. I think what can I do to get a bit more wildlife in there? So it has an effect beyond the garden, and it spreads through the neighborhood. And also there's a squirrel. And the squirrel buries hazelnuts from the tree that I put in, and then it doesn't find them. It puts like 3,000 nuts in the winter, and it won't find all of them. And so I get a forest of little hazel trees, which then I can give to neighbours so that they can have an indigenous species, and also do some guerrilla rewilding down by the riverside where some hedging has been taken out with the defence works for the flooding. So the effect spreads through the people and through the landscape, and it's a small contribution to trying to reverse the damage we've been doing to the planet
Yeah,
and
they do say
and,
there's a
and
lot we
increase
can do.
awareness.
Yeah, collectively do with our own individual gardens. Now, in terms of what you've seen this morning, then, so you look at, I would imagine you start the day by looking out the window. What would you have seen this morning on a typical day?
Well, there's always the sparrows. They come out. They spend the night in the trees and the shrubs, and then they chatter away for about an hour, and then they come out on the tops. And if there's any sunlight at all, they'll sit on the bits of twig that stand above the foliage, and they just kind of warm themselves up, and then they start to go off, fly off and look around food. So that's how the day always starts. Before that, there would be bird song. There was a thrush singing this morning when it was barely light, because those thrushes are. It's a strange thing to be singing at this time of year because it's not a mating season, but the thrushes defend their territory against kind of Viking hordes that come from Scandinavia, redwings and fieldfares they're called. They come in flocks and they eat all the berries all over the British Isles. So though that thrush was singing to defend its territory and saying, go find your food somewhere else. So that's been happening every morning. And then when I put food out, the first bird on it is the blackbird, and it picks its favorite parts out of the mix, which is dried mealworms and little bits of suet, because in the winter they like some fat. Birds are amazing. Birds can put on brown fat in a day. They can eat breakfast and they get brown fat to get them through the day, and then they'll eat their late afternoon meal and they'll put on brown fat to get them through the night, without which they might be killed by that hard frost we've been having.
I tell you what, it's
So,
an
so the winter
education.
pigs,
It's a real education, isn't it? Now, just tell us
it
about the
is,
book,
yeah.
because we sort of need to see this and read this. So, how do people get a copy of your book, or what's happening next with the book?
Well, it won't be for a time yet, although I'm always happy to have visitors to the website, which is gerrymaguirethompson.com. Love to hear from people, answer questions, and so on.
Well, good luck. It sounds wonderful, and do stay in touch with us. Let us know how you get on. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you this afternoon. Thank you, Gerry.
I will keep in touch. Thank you so much.
Really
Lovely
nice
stuff.
to talk to you. Thank you, Gerry. Gerry Maguire Thompson. If you put his name into a search engine, find his website, you can see more details about a year in his wild urban garden.